Hey everyone, and welcome to my channel. When you watch this, it will be a little bit into the month already, but I'm recording this on the 2nd of January and my body has blessed me with the first migraine of the year. So if I seem a little bit subdued or just like unattentive, you know why that is. It's just how it goes, you know. I have migraines quite often, so I still want to film a couple of videos today. And first off, we are going to talk about all of the books I've read in 2024. I love doing this video and I hate doing this video because it is kind of a lot of work to go through so many books. I will talk to you about my least favorite books of the year and my absolute favorite books of the year. And I will go through the books from like basically worst to best. But the like middle books I will only mention with their star ratings, so we don't sit here for like hours. I will talk a little bit more in depth about my 3 least favorite books and then my top books, and I think that is 7 this year. So we did not reach a top 10. I will only mention books I gave 5 stars in that category, and I just didn't read 10 5-star books, even though I did read 102 books, so that's kind of sad. But you know, it happens. I still had a ton of books that I really enjoyed. And my average rating, if you're interested, is 3.97, so it is a little bit better than last year, which is also very exciting. But it also has to do with the fact that I didn't read quite as many of my kind of like backlog TBR books, which usually tend to be rated a little bit lower because a lot of these books are gifts and not books that I have chosen myself, so they sometimes just don't fit my reading taste that well. And so because I didn't read quite as many of those in 2024 as I did in 2023, the average rating is also a tiny little bit better. So before I ramble on, let's just do the cut here for the intro, and we're starting out with my least favorite books of the year, my 2-star books, and these are 3 books that I would say just stay away from them. So we're starting out with the book that I think is like the worst book I read last year. It is very hard to rank these 3, but I think this one is the worst just because of the betrayal I felt, and that is When the Moon Hatched by Sarah A. Parker. Now, I never expected to really like fantasy romance books, but with this one, so many of my bookish friends loved this one, and so many of my bookish friends that share a reading taste with me loved this one. And so I thought, you know, if I ever give one of those like hyped romantasy books a try, it is to be this one. And it was just as terrible as I had imagined. I just really did not like this book. In this one, we follow a fancy, like, assassin main character who doesn't remember her past, but she's like so good at what she's doing, and terrible stuff happens. She goes kind of on this revenge quest, but she has to be saved by this like king who is like very much feared, like people are scared of him, and he's like such a terrible ruler, but then we find out it's just all a facade and he's such a nice guy, and I just hated it. Sorry. Okay, book number 2 on my worst books list is one that I enjoyed reading, but it was so offensive. So this is a book. This is the 1920s mystery that was written in the 1990s. So it should have been kind of like a, you know, like a warning sign, like a red flag already. It is called Death at Wentwater Court by Carola Dunn. And this one we have a young noblewoman, but she needs money, so she starts working as kind of like this writer for yeah, it's like a magazine about like fancy noble houses. So she goes to this house and there's a house party. And when she gets there, someone is murdered, and she kind of slips her way into the murder investigation with the detective on the case. So it is very much like a murder mystery. Like, this is like true, like someone is dead, we're trying to figure out who did it, we interview people, we put together the pieces. And I would have really enjoyed it if it wasn't for the fact that this book is so racist that I couldn't even believe it when I finished it. And it starts out quite with like small things, you know, there's like this one man where the main character thinks about how he's so business savvy and he's such a great businessman, and we find out he has colonies in South America and that's where all his wealth is coming from. And there you already get that little bit of an inkling, and you're still like, well, yeah, but that's kind of like how the world worked back then, I guess. But then the ending goes like full on racism against like people from South America. And yeah, just horrible. I would not recommend. And then my last worst book is a German book, not surprising to me because somehow German books don't work for me. This is called 24 Türen by Klaus Modig. This is an advent calendar book, and so the idea is you read a chapter every night. I loved doing that. Like, I loved reading a chapter every night. That worked out super well for me. The story itself was just trash. It's like this pretentious man. This is set in the 90s. And so he is like complaining about his teenage daughters. Now, I would have been a teenager around that time as well. The way the daughters speak, I never spoke that way. And yeah, it's just all of this was just not it. And it has like a past storyline as well where it tries to do something that has like something like Jesus. I don't know. I did not understand this book and I don't like it. And so yeah, that's number 3. Okay, from here on out, I will just go through the star ratings and mention all of the books that got that rating for me. I have talked about all of these books in wrap-ups and vlogs, so if you want to find out more, you absolutely can. Please don't be alarmed that I don't own a lot of these books physically. I listen to a lot of audiobooks and I also use my library quite a bit, so that's why I don't own a ton of physical books from this list. So we are moving right along to the 2.5 stars, and for that rating I only have Acid Christmas by Charlotte Dune. Okay, now with 3 stars we have Cocaine Blues by Carrie Greenwood, The Undertakers by Nicole Glover, Peril at End House by Agatha Christie, Sommerliebe by Mori Yoko, The London Saron Society by Sarah Penner, Horror Movie by Paul Tremblay, and The Christmas Cottage by Sarah Morgan. Now with 3.5 stars we have Babel by R.F. Kuang, Matters of Choice by Noah Gordon, The Silent Companions by Laura Purcell, At Night All Blood is Black by David Diop, The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin, Gallant by Victoria Schwab, A Tall History of Sugar by Cordella Forbes, The 10,000 Doors of January by Alex E. Harrow, Upright Women Wanted by Sarah Gailey, Cheese Sweet Home Volume 8, this is a manga series, This House is Haunted by John Boyne, Her Royal Spyness by Rhys Bowen, Equal Rights by Terry Pratchett, The Merriest Misters by Timothy Janowski, Lovelight Farms by B.K. Borison, Midnight in Everwood by M.A. Kusnir, and The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. Now with 4 stars, this is the biggest category, so bear with me. We have Our Violent Ends by Chloe Gong. This is book 2 in this series and also the conclusion. A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking by T. Kingfisher. Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross. This is also book 2 in this series and the conclusion. Out There Screaming, edited by Jordan Peele. Annihilation and Authority. This is by Jeff Vandermeer. Those are books 1 and 2 in the Southern Reach trilogy. What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. Where Sleeping Girls Lie by Farida Abike Yemide. Gingerbread by Helen Oyeyemi. What Feasts at Night by T. Kingfisher. A Spell of Good Things by Ayobami Adebayo. Die Unerzählte Geschichte by Vera Weidenbach. Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb. This is the first book in the Life Ship Traders series. Bride by Ellie Hazelwood. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. This was a reread. Cursed Bunny by Bora Chung. The Sea Elephant by Shastriya Kella. Sunbringer by Hannah Kaner. This is book 2 in this series. The Tangleroot Palace by Marjorie Liu. The Bitter Twins by Jen Williams. This is book 2 in the series. As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow by Zulfa Katu. Now, this book definitely was like different when I read it from like what's going on in history right now. How to Become the Dark Lord and Die Trying by Django Rexler. The Ruin of Kings by Jen Lyons. This is the first book in the series. The Black God's Drums by P. Jelly Clark. Heartstopper Volume 3 by Alice Oseman. Katzenjammer by Francesca Zappia. When the Reckoning Comes by Latanya McQueen. Beren and Luthien by J.R.R. Tolkien. The Dead Cat Tail Assassins by P. Jelly Clark. The Blonde Dies First by Joelle Wellington. Dead 11 by Jimmy Giuliano. Monstrous Volume 7 by Marjorie Liu and Sana Takeda. This was a reread. And Monstrous Volume 8 by Marjorie Liu and Sana Takeda. These are obviously book 7 and 8 in this series. Home is Where the Bodies Are by Geneva Rose. Evocation by S.T. Gibson. This seems to be a first book in a series now. These Fleeting Shadows by Kate Ellis Marshall. Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clark. Bookshops and Bondas by Travis Baldry. This is a prequel. Somewhere Beyond the Sea by T.J. Klune. This is book 2 in the series. Love You, Alatka by Amanda Elliott. Christmas at the Gingerbread Inn by Michelle Stimson. A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. This was a reread. And The Angel of Khan el-Khalili by P. Jelly Clark. Okay, now we get to the 4.5 star books, and these are definitely the ones that I would say read them. They're very, very good. They just haven't reached that like extra level of being a new favorite yet. Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. This is the first book in the duology. The Secret Lives of Church Ladies by Disha Filia. The Changeling by Victor Laval. Go Tell It on the Mountain by James Baldwin. Little Nothing by Marissa Silver. This was a reread. The Ninth Reign by Jen Williams. This is the first book in the series. Acceptance by Jeff Vandermeer. This is the third book in the Southern Reach trilogy. Their Wishes Games by Joelle Wellington. She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Jen, the first book in the series. The Mad Ship by Robin Hobb, book 2 in this series. The Familiar by Liber Dugo. The Poison Song by Jen Williams. This is book 3 in this series. Ship of Destiny by Robin Hobb, also book 3 in the series. Matrix by Lauren Groff. The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. This was a reread. The Name of All Things by Jen Lyons. This is book 2 in the series. The Pretty One by Kia Brown. The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea by Axio. The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. This was a reread. The House of Always by Jen Lyons. This is book 4 in the series. Someone You Can Build a Nest In by John Wiswell. The Next Step in the Dance by Tim Gautreaux. Tooth and Claw by Joe Walton. Okay, we made it, and now we're at the 5-star books. So I want to talk a little bit more about these because these are like my top books of the year. They're new favorites, but not all of them are new favorites. So let's start out with the one 5-star reread I had. And that was Monstrous Volume 6 by Marjorie Liu and Sana Takeda. Okay, so for the rest of these, I tried to rank them. I do have kind of a top 6, even though it is 7 books, but it will make sense. So we're starting out on spot number 6. We have the book We Deserve Monuments by Jess Hammonds. This is a YA contemporary book, which is very rare for me, but this one is definitely great. We have a main character who is brought up in a city, but at the beginning of the book, the family moves back into the country, in I think the southern states of the US. because the grandma is sick. And so they're moving into the house with the grandma to help her and take care of her and stuff like that. But the grandma and the mother don't really have a very good relationship with each other. So there is definitely some tension there, and it's not like an easy thing to move there. And then because of that tension, the main character doesn't really have a lot of like time that she spent with her grandmother. She doesn't really have like a deep relationship with her, and this is like her last chance to have that. So we definitely have this like intergenerational family theme that is explored, but at the same time this also explores race and racism in the US, and then also queerness, because our main character is attracted to girls and she is actually very attracted to the girl next door. So this deals with a lot of important topics, and I think it does so in an exceptional way, and if you have not read this book yet, I would highly recommend. On number 5, we have a nonfiction book, and that is Sitting Pretty by Rebecca Taussig. This is a book written by a woman who uses a wheelchair, and it is about how that impacts her life. And what I love about this book so much is the way that she combines her everyday experiences with facts and knowledge from disability studies. So you always have this scientific side to the themes that she explores in the books, but you also get the examples from her like everyday life. And I think it just worked so well the way it was all fitted together. It was such a great read, and I would highly recommend if you like reading memoirs. On number 4, we have a book by one of my favorite authors, and that is Our Missing Hearts by Celeste Ng. This is the 3rd book by this author. I have given all of her books 5 stars so far, so definitely a favorite author for me. But this book is a little bit different because it is more dystopian. The other books by her are contemporary. And in this one, we're looking at the US, and the way I described it is kind of like if Trump had won in 2020, like what could have happened. And so this is like definitely a dystopian world where especially people of Asian descent are discriminated against and are framed as kind of like enemies in society. And what this book explores specifically is the way that governments use children to kind of suppress the parents and to make people afraid. And I think it does so in a very visceral way, and it's definitely a book that is hard to read but is so important. And especially going into 2025, we will see what happens, but I think we're all at a like very fragile point in history right now, and we'll see how much of the past we will remember and how much hardship will come our way. Then my number 3 book is a nonfiction, and this might be a little bit specific to me and what I'm interested in, but this book is especially important to me because it just reignited some of my like motivation to do research, and I work at a university, I should be motivated to do research. And that book is Fearing the Black Body by Sabrina Strings. Now, this is an academic book, but it's not too academic. It's like tiny bit academic. So I would definitely recommend this to everyone who's interested in the topic. And the topic is how fat phobia and racism are connected. So this is a bit of a historical book. It goes through different times of like the modern world and shows how those times viewed bodies, and especially viewed black bodies and white bodies, and how those racist views kind of impacted how bodies are supposed to be. And it was so interesting. This is a fantastic book, and as I said, it reinvigorated me on a deeper level. So my top spot number 2 is a series. It's kind of like 2 books because they're from the same series, so I'm counting them together. And it is book 3 and book 5 in the Chorus of Dragons series. I love this series, and this is this is one of those times, and you won't hear that from me very often, but I'm gonna say it now, you kind of have to push through the first book a little bit to get to the good stuff, because this series just needs a little bit of build-up. I think the first and the second book especially are build-up for the gloriousness that you have in book 3, The Memory of Souls. And then book 4 again has to do a little bit of catch-up so that you can have the gloriousness of book 5, The Discord of Gods. And this series, it's very complex, but what I love especially about it is just the characters. Some of my favorite characters of all time are in this series. For example, Talon and Cenera, and just this like kind of poly relationship we get in here with our 3 main characters. The fact that I even remember names tells you so much about how much I love this series. Now it is hard to kind of summarize, but I will give it a try. So basically this is a 5-book high fantasy series, and in the first book we meet a man called Kirin, and he is imprisoned, and he's kind of telling a person who is kind of imprisoning him, Talon, his life's story. And Talon is like, you know what, I think it goes a little bit differently. So they're basically both telling Kirin's story, and then you're reading a transcript of their conversation, and so you have a third person also putting in footnotes, and it is kind of complex. So I would say like really push through the first book. The first book is quite confusing, and what makes this series so confusing is that people don't tend to stay in their bodies. There is like different ways to swap bodies, to get new bodies, to not have any bodies. So it is sometimes like very hard to keep track of like who's who reborn, and all the like familiar connections that you have in here is just like very mind-blowing. But from the second book onwards, the author got much better at like using especially the footnotes to always like remind you of things and to kind of get you to like think along and stuff like that. So the first book is a bit confusing, but it gets so much better, and also like it's so epic. It's just so epic, the story, and the finale. It was crazy, and it just started snowing outside, so read this series if you haven't yet. Okay, and my number 1 book of the year, again, a book that I was just obsessed with, like true obsession. And I really want to reread this series. Luckily, it is just the duology, and the second book in this duology, it just slapped. It was amazing, and that was He Who Drowned the World by Shelley Parker Chan. So this is a historical fantasy duology, and we're looking at a historical China, and we have a young girl who is destined to be nothing, and her brother is destined to achieve greatness. However, at the beginning of the book, the brother dies, and so our main character takes on the persona of her brother and then goes onto his path of life. And it's so good. This series is dark. The characters in this series are ruthless, they're evil, they're messy as hell. There is like this one character that just broke my heart into 1,000 pieces. The way the storyline of this character ends in this final book is just too much. It's too much. Like, seriously. Shelley Parker Chan, I don't know how they did it, but I need more books by them, like right now, because this book was just everything that I read fantasy for. So that brings us to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed watching it. I hope you enjoyed seeing all of the books that I have read this year, and especially hear me talk about my best books of the year. I would love to hear what your best book of the year was, and then also what was your least favorite read of the year, so I can stay away from that myself. I wish you a happy day. Leave a like or a nice comment. I always appreciate those, and I will talk to you soon. Bye!